Welcome to this week's Quick Charge and to part 5 of When God Doesn't Act Like God. In Job 28:13, the Bible says, whatever his soul desires, that he does, which means God does what he pleases. Now, based on the fact that God knows all there is to know, and he knows more than I do, and he also knows best, he does what he pleases. And that's a good thing. It means that he's free to move in and out of character. The ultimate test for us is when God is acting out of character and not in character. Why does he do that? Well, there are several reasons. One is so that we'll seek him. When God doesn't act like God, it motivates and moves us to seek after him and find him. Another reason is so we can see ourselves and what is actually in our hearts, which can be tricky. The prophet Jeremiah said, the heart of man is deceitful, and who can know it? There is another reason, and it is this, so that we will learn to stand. If you're going to walk this path to the end, if you're going to gain the prize, if you're going to walk with Jesus, and especially if you're going to walk with this God who doesn't always act like God, you're going to have to know how to stand. You can never walk well until we learn how to stand. Parents realize this. Their kids have to stand before they can learn to walk. The reason some find it difficult to walk consistently with Jesus is they've never learned to stand. Finishing strong and finishing well means having to stand when it appears that God's promise, his word, and even his intentions are not valid or trustworthy. When God doesn't act like God, we then tend to act a lot like our old selves. King Saul, he was told by Samuel, if you need to hear from God, go to Gilgal. That is the place of the altar. And here are the instructions that he gave him. You should wait for 7 days until I arrive and tell you what to do. That's 1 Samuel 10:8. This was the agreed upon instructions. This was the promise. This was his word to Saul. And the first occasion that's recorded in the Bible took place a full 2 years later. And the Bible says that Saul waited for 7 days. The time period indicated by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal. So Saul then acted presumptuously in his absence, and he ended up losing his destiny in the process. His reasoning? Well, it was this. You didn't do what you said you would when you said you would. As a representative of God, Samuel is acting out of character. He didn't do what was expected of him. David, when he was returning to his own town of Ziklag, he discovered that it had been plundered and burned, and his entire family taken prisoner, and all of his possessions stolen. And in 1 Samuel 30, verse number 6, the Bible says suddenly David was even in worse trouble. And there was talk among the men, bitter over the loss of their families, of stoning him. David strengthened himself with trust in his God. Where was his trust? It was in this. You will find it in Psalm 115, verse 2 and 3. David said, our God is in heaven, and he does what he pleases. David stood upon the integrity and the veracity of his God. You know, that disappointment and that devastation that he encountered was more than enough to finish him off. But from a place of renewed trust, he sought God in that moment and rose to go after what belonged to him. And in the end, he recovered all. Job said, even if he slays me, I will still trust him. When God doesn't act like God, he is teaching us how to stand and trust. Will you stand in your place, even when your God is silent, distant, mysterious, or even unaccounted for. Join me next week for another quick charge. God bless you.